everyone, it's Martha Novak. I'm so glad to talk with you today. This is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak, and I am Sid Person. We are going to be talking about finishing up a little series on enabling, and before that was codependency. All these things kind of go together, and then we're going to talk about, at the end of the show, or in the middle, manipulating, because that's very much a part of enabling. Sometimes we are manipulated to enable, sometimes we are the manipulator. We're going to give you some characteristics about all that so we can stop that behavior and get on with being our authentic, good, hearty selves. All right? Let's do a quick prayer, put us all on the same page, and then we will launch off into our subject. I'm awful glad to be with you today, by the way. Thank you for supporting this show by tuning in. That means the world. Okay? So, dear God, thank you so much for the opportunity to be together today, all of us that are friends, even friends we don't know yet that are tuning in today. We appreciate it very much. And we open ourselves to a great healing today, a very personal one, as we hear this information, as we participate in this information energetically. We thank you so much for the opportunity to heal, for us to realize what we're doing, because the way to consciousness, the way to heal, is through a triad: awareness to consciousness, ultimately to enlightenment. We thank you so much now as we say and own we know nothing, for it's the you through us and through all things, through our highest selves, through the highest self of everything here, that knows it all. We open to that part of us that we may hear what we need to do as a first step, a second step, a third step, that we may not be overwhelmed with all that we have available to us in our grand potential, but that we take it in steps and in stages, and that we are fully cooperative with that energy of you and what we need to do next. We thank you so much, dear God. We open ourselves now in every aspect of our being to this information and to whatever we are told that we must do. Thank you, dear God, and so it is. Amen. Well, I started out last week talking about a variety of articles. I had just gotten to this one and did a little bit. It was an article called The Slippery Slope. It's hard to say, slippery slope, between kindness and enabling. It's by Marquita Harold. And I thought it was pretty good. Of course, I have to add my 2 cents worth because, heck, that's just who I am. And what I'm supposed to do is teach consciousness here. So this is not a psychology course, although there's some psychology lessons in it. There's some challenges for you to take up. But mainly this is how to deepen in consciousness and go past what we call the egoic child's mind, the part of you that even as an adult thinks like a child, right? And so that's what we're doing today. So that's why I add my 2 cents worth. We're doing something a little different. And when I say a little different, a lot of these articles are written to make you feel better, to give you a little information, to talk about psychology, all of those things and more. None of those things, even though I touch on them, are what we're doing here. So that's why I always proceed a little further with everything. In this article that Marquita wrote, there is a section that says, can you be an enabler? And she has some behaviors here that I want to put on the table because they're very important for you to acknowledge if you're doing this, okay? You know, those of you that are listening to the show can be the enabler or the person who wants to be enabled. I don't know which one you are. Here's the interesting thing. It can be both. You can toggle back and forth. So we're finishing up a series where we just kind of cover everything there is to talk about with some of this. And if good morning, Kat. Good morning to you too, my darling. And if I've left out anything, you all will tell me, I'm sure. Those of you who are on Blog Talk Radio, I've got some sweet people on Facebook Live. We're broadcast both venues, blogtalkradio.com, Facebook Live. And on Facebook Live, you can write me, and we have some regulars and dear friends like Kat who check in. Now, you guys just right away if you have any questions about any of this we're doing. All right. She posits, do any of these behaviors sound familiar? So, ready? I need to say one thing before we launch into this. This is where emotional honesty comes in handy, doesn't it? And for so many years, guys, when we start doing work on ourselves, we're just blooming not emotionally honest. Let's just all admit that. We like to look good. We like to appear better than we are. We may carry some things that are shame-based inside of us, and we'll never be particularly happy until we confront those things, right? So we can change our behaviors, change our attitudes, realize, self-acceptance, which we, by the way, have to have before consciousness opens. Self-acceptance is putting our arms in an embrace around it all. Even the negative, even the things we've done we're not proud of. Why? Because it's all, energy. It's not in and of itself anything but energy. It's not a self-attack. Thank you, sweetheart, whoever sent that heart. It's not, you don't keep the self-attack in place by accepting what you've done, by embracing and saying, yes, this is all of me, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the rich and the poor, the funny and the serious, and everything in between, all of everything. I'm all of this. Only when we allow ourselves to be all of this and look at everything and sincerely, that's the key, right? Sincerely, not just give lip service to the fact that we are everything. Do we have the choice? The choice comes out of responsibility. Good morning, Dorothy. Oh, I'm so glad you're with us. And on that beautiful horse, too. I'm so glad you're here. Only when we accept that kind of responsibility do we have the choice, because this kind of choice comes from the responsibility to be our highest selves more and more and more until that's who we are. I hope I've explained that well enough. Out of the acceptance of everything comes the responsibility for us to say, yes, I am responsible for all of this. I created this, good, bad, or indifferent. Do we have the choice to create something else, to reinvent ourselves on a higher level? It's a marvelous thing, but we need all that energy back. Now, what the ego child's mind does, you see, is it pushes it away. Oh, that's weak, we say. Oh, no, I have to be a perfectionist or nobody will love me. What? Where's the self-acceptance in that, right? Where's the self-acceptance in your denial or your arrogance? Where's the self-acceptance in your isolating and withdrawing from life? Where's the self-acceptance in any kind of exhibitionism, which just shows everybody that you're weak underneath in terms of believing in yourself? You understand. Okay. So now, with that said, let's go in to these behaviors. You might want to write some of these things down. You tend to ignore or make excuses for other people's mistakes or unacceptable behavior. Do you do that? Or do you want someone to do that for you? If so, perhaps you're both. Do you realize that's no judgment? That's just human beings. And the majority of our issues come from our judging our humanness. Darlings, there's nothing wrong with it. You're just human. And so you have an ego child's mind, the part of us that performs like the child still, and you have the highest self mind. And we toggle sometimes between the two. I know you toggle between the two if you're listening to this show, because if you were nothing but the ego child's mind without any sensibility of the highest self, why would you listen to a show like this that is about journeying from one to the other? You see? Good. Next behavior. The needs and desires of others are more important to you than your own. The needs and desires of others are more important to you than your own. Is that true? Next behavior. Feelings of pity, fear, guilt, or shame motivate your gestures of kindness. Now, guys, let's talk about that one. In the emotional experience, in the emotional body of you, there are all sorts of contradictions. So this can be true. And it also can be true that you sincerely love somebody and want to help. Both of those things can exist. We can actually have out and out contradictions in the emotional body. This is why somebody who loves to invest in the mental aspect of them never gets to the emotional aspect, because they say, well, that doesn't make sense. And they disqualify what they're feeling that's in any way contradictory. And I'm saying to you now that the emotional body contradicts itself all the time. I'll give you an example of that. You can, on the inside, want everything to be about you and want all the attention in the room, and on the outside, eschew it. Isn't that interesting? Quite the contradiction. And that's just an example. Good morning, John. Good morning. I'm glad you're with us this morning, dear heart. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're doing well this week. So, take my word for it. There are all sorts of contradictions in the emotional body. This is not, my darlings, the rational part of you. This is the emotional part of you, and sometimes emotional isn't rational, and sometimes it contradicts itself. Our job is just to see what it's saying and resolve it in some way, so that the energy can be released from that experience, that emotion, that trauma, that being stuck on something that somebody said to you 20 years ago. Hello, Michelle. Good to see you. And to release that energy. So, you know what happens to it? It comes back into present time, and and much of it goes into your spiritual body. And this is why, with enough work, you wake up in consciousness. All of a sudden, your ego child's mind isn't leading you anymore. It isn't driving the bus. It was so cute. I said to someone the other day that it's as if, your 6-year-old is driving the bus. Now, we have to ask ourselves, should a 6-year-old drive the bus? The answer is no. Well, should it be grabbed by the scruff of the neck and tossed off? No, that's not what you do to a 6-year-old. You do take the bus keys away from the child and say, go get a comfortable seat in the back and make yourself comfortable, but I'm driving now as the adult, you see. That's what this is about. And that's the difference between the ego child's mind that's kind of controlled everything. It always does with everybody. Don't beat yourself up about that until it doesn't. And you have more and more energy in the higher mind. To do that, it is like a garden. We've got to get in a garden, and we've got to pull up the weeds that we don't want so the things you do want will grow there. What grows in the emotional body naturally and healthily? Well, how about awe at how the system works of God? How about forgiveness and compassion and unconditional love? You know, we bat that word around, that phrase around, unconditional love, all the time. I see it in the news almost daily. I tell you, I hate the way people are using that, because you don't receive, you don't get, and you don't give unconditional love except in deep levels of consciousness and enlightenment. That's where you're capable of it. So we have to question our ideas of love, you see. Good. All right, let's go on to the next one, shall we? You continue to help, even when it's neither requested or acknowledged. You know, I do need to put on the table that if enabling is going on here, you probably, if you're the enabler, you're not going to get back what you give. And in fact, I can guarantee you won't, because that's not what enabling does. It doesn't, you're enabling the other person not to do for you, not to take responsibility for themselves, so they certainly are not going to give in kind. It's just not going to happen. You're allowing that other person to stay the child. Maybe somebody's allowing you to stay the child. You see? Okay. Every time I've seen enabling going on, whether it's between couples or in an office or a parent and child, or name the scenario, between spouses, I've never seen anybody have a balanced relationship and there's not energy that's traded back and forth. The interesting thing is it's really not a relationship unless energy trades back and forth in equal measure. Not at the same time, of course. Okay? I mean, there may be a day that I'm having that's a bad day, and Michael steps in and does the dishes and helps around the house and really does all my tasks. But let me tell you, at some point when he's having a bad day, I'm going to step in and do the same. That's what we do, right? Good. The next behavior is helping others makes you feel needed and wanted and gives you a sense of having value and makes you feel like you're worth something. Guys, I'm sure it won't surprise you on a show like this to realize you better have that anyway. Without doing a thing. Without doing a thing. A number of years ago, and this was a number of years ago in the early 80s, I got very sick. I had mononucleosis, you know, that kind of awful disease. And I was in bed for about 6 months. It exhausted me to go the 10 or 15 feet to the bathroom in our small apartment. Up until that point, I could tell you that I was what I created. Not necessarily what I did for others, although you could call an act of creation something you did for others. I was back then acting, writing children's musicals, directing, that kind of thing. But here I was, flat on my bloomin' back. And I got the lesson as I lay there, is, do I have any value just laying here like a slug? That was a description, not a judgment, by the way. Or not? The conclusion I came to is the same one you'll come to. if you really look at it, and I hope you don't have to get sick to show it to yourself, but do you have value? Do you have value just sitting where you are right now? Do you? Washing the dishes, sitting in your chair, lying on the couch, listening to the show. Do you have value? Yes, you have inestimable value. Now, the thing that confuses us about value is this. Sometimes value is control. In this case, it is control. You see? You need to have control of your life, so it's you jump in there and you give them what you think they need and what you think they want. They may want it, and there's an element of this that's self-indulgent because it's about you. It's not altruistic. It's not, babe, I want to do this for you, you know? All right. You've got to find your worth as a person. That is inestimable. You are a child of God. You are that middle component of the Trinity that everybody has heard about, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Let me tell you what that means. The Holy Ghost is everything in the world that is not you, but is God, because God is everything, right? Yeah. It's either in low frequency degrees, like the ego child's mind, or high frequency, like the highest self. But everything's God. So all the things out there, the cat that's sitting right next to me, the trees in the yard, the bench that's down in the yard, the desk, the phone, my husband who's downstairs having breakfast, all of that is the Holy Ghost, is the God that is not me, but is everything. The Father in the Trinity is that inner God, that aspect of God you are. People have called it the inner spark, you know, they've called it a lot of things, but it's the God self in you. That's your true authenticity when we're talking about you as an authentic being. It's stripping away all the pretense and all the trying to be big and all the judgment of self and others. But you judge others because you're judging yourself. We're just stripping all that away and who you are. You in your most natural, and the word that's often used, this authentic state, is the Father. There you go. So, what's the part that unites the outer and the inner? You know what it is. It's the human experience. It's you, the human. That's what makes this work, uniting the inner and the outer. Jesus was not the only one Jesus held that place for you. He's not just the only one in the Trinity. You are. That's your place too. That's your place, uniting the inner and the outer. You see? It all works together. So, how does that affect? You're saying, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that. I don't like that about myself. I don't like this. You're pushing the energy away of that human experience when it's about accepting that, so that the true unity of those three aspects of us and this world come together. It comes together as you. That's why I think it's so funny when you've heard all these religious communities and cults and things that eschew the physical body. Well, what? You're here in it. There's a reason for that. It's the uniting factor here when you don't keep pushing these aspects away. I don't know why. All of a sudden, I'm getting tickled. My mother would tell a story about, I think, a first cousin of hers. They were all having Sunday dinner, and they had invited the preacher and his wife over, and they were all sitting at this long table, you know, and they were saying blessing, and they asked my little mother's cousin to say the blessing, and she said, let's see if I can remember this. Bless this food and damn the skin, back your ears and cram it in. I don't know why all of a sudden that's occurring to me. And as the story goes, she then slid under the table as everyone was horrified and poured iced tea in everybody's shoes. Strange family I come from, nevertheless. A lot of fun, huh? Okay, moving along, kids. It's very important for you to know your value and not get it from self-sacrifice, by the way, from overly cleaning the house, by being a perfectionist, by all those things that we do that only say we don't feel safe in our world. You got to find that you're safe in your world right now, and that you're going to be fine, and God is right here with you. And that only really occurs as you open consciousness. The idea that, wait a minute, I am never alone. I'm always in unity with God because I am the aspect of God. It lives within. There's a living God right here, right now, in me, in you. But if you don't realize it, it's just what? You were standing by the door when God gave that out? No, nothing was left out of you. You just have more to go. I did too. I still do. We just remove issues that we focus on, and then all of a sudden we're in the deeper level of what really is. The real, authentic beings that we are, and a better and more happy reality. All right, moving along. Her next point is, you are afraid that others will think you're selfish or mean if you don't help. I think it's really important for us to know how much we can do, and only then have the choice to do a little more for true, clear, altruistic reasons. Not self-sacrifice, which is, by the way, an issue. Self should never be sacrificed. That I do something for you that is generous, that I can do right now, and I have the energy for, and the time for, I'm delighted. If I don't have that, I'm going to say no, because I can't right now. You understand? The next point, and the last point she has on here, is you believe the more you do for others, the more they'll love you. That's just not true. Because the whole system of enabling is that you don't get back what you put out. It's interesting because I watch clients. They all absolutely reveal themselves when they come to my home, when I've observed them for a while. For years, when I was teaching in my home in Atlanta, I had this whole bank of teas. I always tried to have some little food for people so that they can keep their energy up, level up in classes or in private sessions. Everybody has tea when they come in. And it's so interesting. Look, I'm not looking for a thing, but it's so interesting to observe how people come in and say, I just bought this tea. I bought you an extra tea because you're always so generous giving us tea. And the people who would never think of bringing in anything are in such poverty mentality, they never think of giving anything back. They just want, give me. Right? It's very interesting. It never worries me because everybody starts out in the ego child's mind heavily when they come to me. But they don't end up that way. Everybody brings the tea or whatever without being told. They just wake up. And it's interesting because when you do this work, you want to share what you're discovering. You want to share that people's lives can be better. Now, keep in mind, sometimes people are turned off by that. I'll never forget. I don't know why this was on my mind this week. You know, I've done a lot of corporate work in addition to working with artists and everything. And so there was a group that I don't believe I worked with, but they had me in to ask about my program. And I explained the best way I knew how, but I could see it was a panel of like 6 men and me. And one of the men said, and this was, I want to say it was around the time that Jim Jones suicide happened in Guyana. And this man said, and what makes you any different from Jim Jones? Which it was all I could do not to just, fall off my chair. I thought that was hilarious. All I could think of was, well, I don't serve Kool-Aid. Sometimes people just don't want to know, babes. People some might not want to go, might want to not know this. Why isn't that all right? See, it is. You wouldn't want anybody to tell you how to live or die. I certainly wouldn't want anybody telling me. And yet, this world is filled with people telling you how to do both. You gotta wake up on the inside, know who you are, hold to your values, make sure they're there every time you have an interaction with anybody, and create your life well. That's my wish for you. What was it? Marquita? Yes, Marquita Harold goes on to say, now I think this is an extremely important statement. She says, and I quote, "To build healthy relationships, we need to recognize that sometimes our motivation for helping others is as much, if not more, about fulfilling our own needs." Yeah, there we are. I know some people that are not clients of mine. It's a father and a son. They both have the same issues. They are entrenched in those same issues. And let me tell you, they are enabling each other so much that you will never be able to get a sliver of light in that relationship. Not unless they wake up, but they're getting so much out of this. I look at the father, and it's tragic, because the son is an adult and still curled up on the floor when something goes wrong in a fetal position. And the father is doting on him. What happens when the father dies? Father doesn't want to even look at that because he's getting a lot out of being the savior. You remember that there is a victim, martyr, savior syndrome. And you don't get to be the same savior without being the victim and the martyr too. This man is victimizing himself and his son. Just the way it is. He's doing it because he's lonely. That this is the only relationship he can have. And I think he over-identifies with the son as himself. She goes on to say that providing temporary help to someone in need certainly does exemplify kindness and consideration toward the recipient. And it makes us feel wonderful when we do something for others. It really does. But the whole point of consciousness is to be conscious of your motivations for doing anything. Because it's those motivations that can be adulterated with the ego child's mind. And if we're trying to deepen consciousness, we have to have more and more energy in the spiritual body and the highest mind and the authentic self, you see. True compassion and empathy and love are wonderful. And I say yes, absolutely. All of those things belong in a healthy emotional body. But what makes it unhealthy? Your motivations from the ego child's mind. That does not mean I'm judging them. That's for me to say we all have them, but by challenging them and releasing the energy of what created that, it becomes easier and easier to become your highest self and stay there. Isn't that nice? She goes on to say, when you fall into the habit of enabling, the result is that everybody loses by inches. I'll say, even by miles, okay? As the enabler, you're trying to help, but wind up experiencing a constant state of stress as you attempt to balance your own needs against the needs of others. I'm going to say if you even know what your needs are. Because people fall into this, I see it constantly, and they don't have a clue about what their needs are. That's why they can abandon themselves so easily. You have got to know yourself well. You've got to know your balance points. You've got to know everything there is to know about you. You can't turn your head away and say, I don't want to know that. That's an ugly aspect. I say it's energy. Put your arm around it. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just in the ego child's mind because you've been trained to be there. You're listening to a show like this because you get a calling for something else. You've got a calling for something else. I say good. You keep in mind, too, that the enabler is not going to get back that energy. Many times, I see people, when they are just bone dry, they have just been drained to smithereens. And they just don't have anything left. The person that they've enabled has just used them up. You think they're going to get anything back now? When they need something? Absolutely not. That person's going to move on to the next person that can give them something. Because that's what they do. Does that make them a bad person? Of course it doesn't. It makes them somebody that has to get over their issues like everybody else. But we all have the choice to do it or not. So if you recognize somebody that doesn't want to do that, if you can, move on. If you can't, I have a woman that is in my program, and she's married to someone who absolutely does not want to change. How are we dealing with that? Well, she can always divorce him, but she's not ready to do that, right? So what does she do instead? I'm trying to get her to know herself really well, stand up for herself, but love her life. Be interested in things, get excited about what she's doing, about her own talents, gifts, and abilities. Then she won't focus on what she's not getting from that man, you see. If you are not an active participant in your life, you're doing yourself a disservice. But many times, people need to do some work on themselves before they can be an active participant in their own lives. Why? Because they're doing some of the things I mentioned before. They're denying things, they're arrogant about things and covering up their insecurities. They are an exhibitionist covering up their insecurities. They are isolating and withdrawing because they don't know how to deal with everything. It's just too much. Now, why do any of that? Why not just get straight with all of this and be yourself? It's great relief to realize you're just human and to accept it finally. Oh, we can all say, oh, I accept that. What is Martha talking about? I accept that. If you're answering glibly like that, no, you're not. Sorry. No. Nope. But part of the journey is to finally get, wait a minute, I get it. I see so clearly what I'm doing, then I don't want to do it anymore. See, the interesting thing is you can say, oh, yeah, I do that. Oh, yeah. In the mental body, but the mental body doesn't challenge you. You don't have to live by that. You can just hold a belief. But consciousness awakens when every single body is involved and you acknowledge it and you own it and you have a choice out of it to continue or not continue. But it's really looking at it. And that's what this kind of therapy is for. It's a reality-based therapy where you look at what you're doing. You look at the pattern. You find that pattern on deeper and deeper levels. It changes slightly each time. It's the most fascinating journey. It really is. And then, and only then, when there's nothing else to know, you go, I don't want to do this anymore. Look at what I get every time. I see now how I'm using the energy and why the energy results in this. It's a script that's already written, so you can't change the end until you change the whole script. You see? That means waking up, changing the pattern, becoming conscious of all the little moments that contribute to that, and it is literally the moment. It is, you're doing something, you're saying something, and you're having a moment where you go, why did I do that? Why did I say that? And inside you're going, oh, I wanted it to be altruistic, and I want to say it's because I'm so kind, but I want something out of these people. Now, instead of you saying, ooh, I did like that, instead of that, why don't you say, well, Eureka, that's how I'm using my energy. Geez, what if I was just kind when I wanted to be kind? What do you think you'll get back then? Because let me tell you, you're getting back what you send out. If you got an adulteration, might look at the men you're dating, might look at the women you're dating, because the adulteration is bringing in what you should look at. You see? Ah, life is wonderful. It shows us. It's a mirror to what we're doing, right? Nobody likes that. And yet it's enormously important. I laugh that in consciousness work, we look in the mirror. Let's say we look in the mirror today, I mean the real mirror, and we have a bad hairdo. What do? You pick up a brush and a comb or some gel or whatever you're going to do, and you arrange your hair, right? But if this were the analogy that I'm trying to make here, and the mirror was showing us what we need to correct, like bad hair, most of the time we yell at the mirror or yell at the other people in the room. We don't do what we need to do, which is take a comb and a brush and some gel and arrange the hair. Therapy is the comb and the brush and the gel so that we can correct it. Yelling at the mirror, yelling at yourself, hating yourself for having bad hair is hating yourself for being human. That is not going to get you anywhere, right? Okay. If you really want to help others in a way, she goes on to say, that results in the greatest good, the next time there's an opportunity to lend a helping hand, try focusing on how you can show the individual to help themselves. It's the old story of you can give somebody a fish or you can teach them to fish. Teach them to fish. She goes on to say, and I think this is a real important point, she goes on to say, but what if something bad happens? What if they fail? Yeah, what if? It's true that even when you show someone the way to help themselves, they may stumble, they may fail, and they may turn around and blame you. I've never once seen anybody who has been enabled when the other person is pulling back now and is finding balance, ever says, I want to thank you for the years that you have given me so much. And you're right, now's the time for me to do it on my own. I've never once seen that. Why? Because it comes out of the highest consciousness. And the enabled person is in the ego child's mind, and you've told them they can stay there. You've actually shown them that it's great to stay there and that you're going to support them there, and they don't have to do a damn thing. So they're going to be mad. So what? Is what you're doing right? The highest self, do you know this? The highest self does things because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a popular thing to do. They do it because it's the right thing to do. And this is the time to put on your old Leo boots and do the right thing. She goes on to say, you may be tempted to jump in and save the day and prevent another emergency, but in the end, you're only preventing them from building the skills and confidence they need to solve their own problems. It's true. It's true. It's difficult, by the way, I'm going to launch off a minute, when this is a spousal relationship, because if you have been enabling a husband has been enabling a wife, your finances may be tied up in this. Somebody may be making very bad decisions. This is why I'm going to put on the table, unless you're really sure of somebody, everybody needs their own money. This is not a world that you can exist without everybody having their own money. Sure, have a mutual pot that you pay your bills out of, and you buy major purchases like cars and houses out of, but you need your own money. So if you are not working to make your own money, get creative, because you need it. You need your own money. This world and the consciousness of this planet does not support a dependent child. It only supports that dependent child in its growth, not in its financial gain or anything else. So please, take me seriously. Certainly, you need courage, because we're talking about the answers to your situation, whatever it is, by the way, being outside the box. What, you think it's going to be inside the box? Where's growth in that? It's outside what you think your limits are. It's just right outside. And then when those boundaries are pushed out a little more, when those borders, I should say, not boundaries, are pushed out a little more, guess what's going to be outside of that? The next level of what you want. Good. Go for it. Right? The key to breaking, she goes on to say here, the key to breaking the pattern of enabling is to return the responsibility to the person it belongs to. I have a little different way of saying that, and that is responsibility is ultimately the baseline that leads to the empowerment of self. You have to have responsibility in place before you can it can ever lead to the empowerment of self, and that's what all this is about. What do you think your potential is? It's the empowerment of self. That does not mean, in the ego child's mind, sense of domination, strength, control. That's not what I'm talking about. Authenticity in spirit, being who you are, being able to speak up when somebody crosses your boundary, being able to see where your boundary is so you don't cross it, acting for the right reasons, and much more. The enabled person, she says, lives in the same world with the same rules as the rest of us. But by managing their world for them, they fail to learn to navigate life in a whole and healthy way. And this is one of the reasons we're about to talk about manipulation. Because But by manipulating their world for them, or them manipulating you to manipulate their world for them, they fail to learn to navigate life in a whole and healthy way. Here's another really important point. I was very glad she made this one. Enabling is essentially love turned to fear, and help turned to control. And the effects are toxic for everybody. I thought that was a really, really good point she made. Saying no can sometimes be the most loving and life-expanding gesture of all. And we've got to get really comfortable with that, don't we? This is about emotional maturity. There are just some things that you should be able to do in the world. As a mature human being, you should be able to talk about your feelings. You should be able to look at a problem on all sides. You should take your responsibility for it, see what's your responsibility, what's somebody else's responsibility for it. You should be able to talk about it in a mature fashion. You should be able to work through problems. You should be able to cook. You should be able to do your laundry. You should be able to know how to function in the world mentally, emotionally, physically, and by the way, spiritually, by thinking new thoughts and always expanding your mind. When you are first trying to make this change from an enabler, for example, to balanced person and balanced relationship, everybody, and even you, are going to say, oh, this looks like I no longer care. Is it true? No, you've just been trained to sacrifice yourself, though. So we've got to rebalance what that feels like. You've got to be able to see it and go, wait a minute, I'm just about to approach a line where I give too much away. In class the other day, I had a woman who said her sister calls once in a while, and they talk for a long time. No, it wasn't her sister, it was her brother, and they talked for a really long time. Hours. And I said, darling, she said, I find myself getting anxious and annoyed. I'm playing video games while I'm talking. And I said, why don't you just get off the phone? I can't do that. That wouldn't be loving him. You've got a little work to do. Because where's the self-respect in that? All I see is you sacrificing yourself to placate another individual at the expense of you feeling bad because you want to get off the phone several hours before. You see? You got to have self-respect in this, guys. And many of us have been trained not to respect the self, but to do these other things instead. Whew. Let's wake up. Now, I found another really interesting article. This is by Matt Dukzieminski. Oh, I love his name. Matt Dukzieminski. It's called 10 Habits of Manipulative People. Because many times the enabled are manipulating people who are vulnerable to do their bidding. But just because you're the enabler doesn't mean that you're not trying to manipulate somebody to control them into better behaviors or doing what you want. So I thought before we end this lesson, we better talk about habits of manipulative people. Now you keep in mind Enabling is when someone is taking responsibility for what someone else can and should be doing for themselves. That's why enabling is what it is. Because if you're doing something for me, like if you're doing my radio show every morning and I'm saying, great, I'll just stay in bed, I don't have to do it, 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 you do it, you do it, you do it. That's something that I can and should be doing for myself. That's enabling. So if you are the one seeking to be enabled, if you are the one enabling, you're still using manipulation or being used by it, you see. So with a nod to Matt Dukes-Zeminski, and I just wanted to say that name again, let's talk about his list here. Number one, they play innocent. Manipulators have a way of playing around with the truth to portray themselves as the victim. Remember what I said about victim, martyr, savior? This is hard to spot sometimes, unless you're really looking, because they switch roles. They're not going to just be the savior. They're not going to just be the victim. They're going to be everything. They flip, okay? But they're going to play innocent. I didn't mean that. You've misread me. Everyone misreads me. There's the victim. Or you can do what we see sometimes in national politics, and unfortunately a lot of people use this, whether they're in politics or not. DARVO. Remember me telling you about DARVO? It stands for DARVO. It stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So you can say, sweetie, did you make me a cup of tea? And you don't mean anything by it at all, really, right? And someone with DARVO goes, I did not do that because you never tell me what you want. And I didn't know whether you were going to sit down at the table with me or not. You're always too busy for me. That's DARVO. They have taken a situation that didn't even require an overreaction, and they reversed victim and offender. They were the offender, but they're going to be the victim now. You keep in mind, if you do too much self-sacrifice, i.e., there's the savior, you're really the victim if you do it for egoic reasons, you see. Thank you for listening to that. All right. This Matt, I'm going to call him Matt because his last name's a mouthful, I should say. He goes on to say, a friend makes me feel like a bad friend for not lending him money to support a disgusting habit, when in actuality he was the bad friend and even asking for the money in the first place. They play innocent. Okay. Number two, they play dumb. Manipulative people will drain the energy of everyone around them by looking to their friends for help, only to go ahead and do whatever they wanted anyway. I had a friend, so help me God, I'm not making this up, that in our day and age now is talking about the exact same things that she talked about in high school. The exact same way. The exact same things bother her. I can say, well, why don't you do this instead? And she never acts on anything. She only goes to 15 to 20 other people, says the same thing to them. They all give her advice. She feels cared about. So many of us, she is someone who, what do I want to say, cries that she doesn't have any friends. Well, don't you think everybody gets a little tired of that ultimately? I can tell you that's no way to have a friendship. That's an attachment, not a connection with other people, you see. She just wants to have somebody to talk to hear herself talk, not to hear what they have to say or how they are. This friend is also a better friend when you're pitiful. She likes that because she can rush in, victim, martyr, savior, right? She doesn't like it so much everybody's doing well. That's sad to me. Okay. Number 3, shall we go to that? They rationalize their behavior along with not taking their friend's advice or any responsibility for what they're doing. Manipulative people, Matt goes on to say, make their negative behavior seem like the only option. They make it seem that they have made the right decision, even though you know better from an objective point of view. They often seek to win arguments rather than coming to a consensus with the other party. The implication here is that they weren't truly listening to what you had to say in the beginning, right? They were just waiting for you to finish so they could offer a rebuttal regardless of how sound your advice was. I'm thinking of this particular woman. She doesn't even give you a chance for a rebuttal. You know, she doesn't give you much of a chance to talk, period. It's the way it is. Number 4. People like this, manipulators, change the subject often. Since manipulative people only really care about themselves, they ultimately will steer a conversation toward their own needs any chance they get. They'll do this especially when they know they're wrong about something and don't want to admit it. They'll flip off the subject. You have to keep going, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. This is not about national politics. This is about what you did this morning. They'll just go everywhere. It's like a ricochet. It's because they're afraid of emotion. Do you understand that? They don't know how to handle it. They've never learned to work through it, which is, I will say again, the responsibility of every adult in the world to learn how to deal with emotion. Stay present. Learn how to work through problems. Does everybody like that? Nobody likes that. But an adult, especially an adult in the highest self, knows how to do it and is willing to do it. So instead of validating the other person's opinion, Matt goes on to say, they'll just change the subject to something innocuous or otherwise unrelated to the previous topic. That's getting too hot, you see. This helps them avoid the truth in a roundabout way. And he goes on to say that's fairly unnoticeable to others. I'm going to tell you, it's not unnoticeable at all. You know, anybody who's looking at the other person goes, what? You know, where'd they go? You know, that's not even what this is about. Number 5, they tell half-truths. Manipulative people tend to mold the truth to their advantage. They'll often hide information that they know will expose them as liars, acting as if this is somehow better than telling the straight-out lie. Manipulators approach all interactions as if they're in a court of law, where they can be held accountable for what they say, and it can be used against them. By acting this way, they can honestly say, I never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that. You technically never did say that, but the way you skirted the truth wasn't exactly right either. Number 6, they will make you feel guilty. You're good at emotionally manipulating you, you see. Manipulative people might find themselves in a relationship where, let's say, you just don't have the time and energy to deal with whatever they want, okay? And the manipulative person will make you feel like you're not ever there for them. All or nothing, is a way they think. Always or never. You're never there for me. Oh yeah? Really? They may even get you to put your own well-being on the back burner, so they'll have somebody to complain to and seek advice from. Advice they don't heed, as we've talked about. The mother who says, "It's okay. I'll have Christmas alone this year. I've never had Christmas alone, but I want you to go and live your life. Go." That's pretty overt, right? But there are subtle ways to do that too. And I want you to wake up if you're doing it or if somebody's doing it to you. Number 7, they insult others. Manipulators are often rude and abrasive by nature. Manipulative people, we all can joke with each other, but manipulative people go way overboard with jabs and insults and baiting you. Do you know what I mean by that? Baiting you, sniping, saying things that, gosh, you just can hardly let pass. They know where to stick the knife. It's a talent they have. What if we took that amazing talent and applied it to some things in the highest self and positivity and creating the life they want? Wow. The insulting of others can actually even occur in social situations to undermine, they think, however inconspicuously, you and establish dominance. Manipulators never got over that high school mentality, where everybody was cool if they called each other names. They will make you feel small by their words. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I can only think that they didn't know some of the mean people that are out there in the world. The other thing is that happens in the ego child's mind, but it doesn't happen in the highest self. Let's say in the highest self, you know who you are, you know who your values are, you know that your intentions are good, you have thoroughly analyzed all of it, and you know yourself very well. So when somebody says something to you, which by the way they don't usually when you're in this state, but if they ever did, you could just tell them the truth. One year, many years ago, I had really tried to help a woman who was very, very messed up. And I don't do this anymore, but I had given her a discount trying to help her. This was in the early stages of my work, and I'd done that. I'd carried her for a year. And I don't remember what it was, but I told her that I was going to now have to charge her full price. And again, here we are. She got mad. And she just ranted and yelled. She was one of 2 people that ever yelled at me. And I listened, and then I said, very quietly, "That's such an interesting reaction." Because another reaction you could have had is, "Thank you so much for this last year. It has meant everything to me. And by God, I'm going to see what I can do to scrape up that money. And we'll go forward." You could have said thank you. You see? Okay? Number 8, they bully others. This is a big one. Manipulative people are always bullies. This goes beyond insults and often involves alienation and the spreading of rumors. Now, this is what Matt says. Again, this is childish behavior, but it is often exhibited by immature manipulative adults. Actions such as ignoring certain people in a group, not letting them voice their opinions, or leaving them behind are some of the more adult ways to bully. Calling somebody stupid, I will add, or saying, "That's a stupid way to do this," is, in essence, calling them stupid, just not directly. Manipulators will use these methods to establish dominance. In truth, these people are incredibly self-conscious and have low self-esteem. They're giving it away. They're telling you they do. And they'll hurt anyone around them in order to feel better about themselves. Number 9, they minimize your behavior. Manipulators make it seem like their words and deeds are not a big deal. They'll laugh it off. They'll say, okay, I apologize, and not really mean it. Ironically, most of the time, it's them who made the big deal out of things. That is, until they hear something they don't like and they turn the tables on the other party. Matt goes on to say, they clearly don't show any empathy for the people who've spent valuable time and energy on their behalf. And instead, they shift the blame onto everyone else. Remember Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. They know they have a problem, but they make it seem like the world is out to get them instead of the other way around. It's really interesting because this is a defense of a lot of people, this "the world's out to get me" defense. So I tell the truth in sessions and say, here's what I think you're doing. And if it resonates, you're gonna, acknowledge it, own it. I'll get rid of it. We'll change the energy and send it in a different direction. Always a good one, positive one. And they'll say, "Oh, I'm so dizzy. Oh, I feel like you're scolding me." And I just have to look at them and say, when's the drama going to stop? This is just your drama. So you've arranged it so I can't go get it because, I'll hurt you. We got to grow up. Nobody's here to hurt anybody. We're here to get well. And you're not going to get away with doing that. No drama. Drama keeps you on the surface. Drama makes even you believe you're feeling deeply. You're not. It's there, so you don't have to feel deeply. You're just spinning around on the surface. So don't you be fooled by that. And don't be fooled by anybody else doing that, okay? I think that the histrionic personality is a very damaging thing. I'd like to start attacking it early when we work together, because by the time you get to knowing everything and you're just ready to move into your highest self, if it's still there, you've got to just try to create drama with things. Now, let me say this. I've given lectures on this before on this radio show, and I'm going to say it again to remind you. There are primary emotions and there are secondary emotions. Secondary emotions and tertiary emotions are always the ego child's mind. So here's how to stay in the primary. What is the incident that happened? I had a car wreck, let's say. What is the emotion involved? I'm very, I'm rattled, and I'm feeling guilty no, not feeling guilty. I'm trying to remember an accident, an actual story that it was told yesterday. I had the accident. I am just in shock and a little rattled. And then what are you going to do about it? But if you take it into, even though somebody hit you, oh, I feel so guilty about this. It wasn't your fault. That's inappropriate guilt. Oh, ever something like this is always happening to me. Ego child's mind, all or nothing. Always it happens to me. Poor me. I'm making myself the victim. All that secondary stuff. So the way to find the primary, there are only 3 things involved. Define the situation. Define the feeling or feelings that are inherent in that situation, that are true to the situation. Don't take it into the history. It's just about that moment of your trauma or whatever is going on in that incident. And then what's the solution there? Solution is calling the police, calling her husband, calling, whatever, getting on with it. Okay. And number 10, you ready for that? They blame others. You did it! No, you didn't. As I said, manipulators shift blame constantly. This is Matt's voice. They skate through life without taking any sort of responsibility for their actions. They either flat out don't admit they did anything wrong, or they have some explanation to make their actions sound reasonable given the circumstances. People can have just enough therapy to make good excuses for themselves. Manipulative people simply don't live by any code of ethics. And when it catches up with them, they'll point the finger anywhere else except at themselves. Now I'm going to add an 11th one that Matt doesn't have in here. And I think it's an important one to note. They rush you. They've got their own agenda. And it's all about them. It has nothing to do with you. And they'll rush you into bed, into signing the contract, into. Don't be rushed. You get to take all the time you need. You do not have to hurry. Okay? Okay. That's today's show. We have 11 minutes left to go. Yay! Guys, thank you so much. I want to tell you right now, it means the world to me that you're getting the word about the show. Thank you so much. That really helps increase our numbers, which we're trying to do, of course, because we're trying to tell everybody what we're doing here. The conscious community is growing, and it all has to do with how generous you guys are being in your social media and in telling friends about this. So please help us increase those numbers. That really is what you can do for us on this radio show, Real Talk with Martha Novak. Guys, let's do a prayer with my full gratitude. We'll be back next week, I believe. Yep, next week. But I don't know what the show is about. It'll be a good one, though, because I have a couple of things that I'm thinking about right now, okay? All right, let's do a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for everything, for opening our minds to some of these things, to showing us how in our lives we're using them, not using them, or being taken advantage of by others, and how we can stop this in a loving manner from our highest selves, which is the full authority of who we are. We open ourselves to the aspect of God that we are as your ascended energy. And we thank you so much, dear God, for we're never alone, not ever. And there's a community around us of like-minded people. And we recognize each other in the world, don't we? We all do. Dear God, open us to our potential, our talents, our gifts and our abilities, our lovingness, our highest selves. Show us what we're doing in the ego child's mind that we may be responsible for it, aware of it, get help for it, and move past it, and always expand our energies, because God is an ever-expanding and infinite source of more and more and more information. We thank you, dear God. Knowing you is knowing us. Knowing us is knowing you. We're all one. We thank you so much. And now we ask for whatever healing to take place right now, whatever we're willing to give up, and in its place, a deepening sense of our own consciousness, awareness, and love. God hates a void. These things are always filled with positive, good energy, and we accept those things now. We say this prayer in your name, and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to this show today. Thank you, dear God. Thank you. And so it is. Amen. Okay, kiddos. Hope you have a good week. All right? And stay well and healthy out there. The world's still wacky, so don't take anything for granted. But enjoy your life and create a good one. Okay? Take care of yourselves now. Bye-bye. See you next week.